Hello and welcome to Public Affairs Now, our super local look at what's going on in the Arundel County Council and the Maryland General Assembly. We have about a month left in the 90-day session, and our special guests this week are reporter Len Lazarick from MarylandReporter.com. Thank you for joining us, Len.
Good to be here again.
And we have Delegate Michael Malone representing District 33. Thank you for joining us this week. Appreciate it.
Thank you for inviting me.
Great. Well, let's get started, guys. With about 1 month left in the session, Len, give us an idea where we are right now in terms of the timeline. What happens in this? We like to divide it into three. What kind of happens in the last section?
Well, in the last month, they've had the first month. They're just kind of getting started. They've had most of the major hearings. And now we're at the point where they're actually doing the heavy lifting. They're taking, the committee votes are being taken, and they're bringing bills to the floor. We're coming up to what's called the crossover date. Bills that are passed on each house, in each house before the March 21st date are guaranteed at least a hearing in the other house. And so bills that you actually want to get passed really need to get passed this week. Of course, that doesn't apply for bills that leadership really wants to get through, and there are other reasons that might not happen. But now we're getting to the intense period where they're having double sessions and there are fewer hearings.
And the speakers just announced that we are going to be going to double sessions and start working on Saturdays. So I do sort of equate it to sort of starting to run double time now.
Excellent. Well, Delegate Malone, tell us a little bit about your district that you represent.
I represent District 33, which includes the areas of Serena Park, Crownsville, Millersville, Crofton, Severn, the Broadneck Peninsula, Arnold, and hopefully I haven't left out any cities, it's also one thing that's particularly interesting about District 33 as far as voters. It's one of the largest, if not the largest, district as far as voters under the drawing.
South County.
Well, not so much. South County's now covered more by 30. I'm speaking actually in total number of voters.
I see.
And under
Lots of Republican packing.
Correct,
Right.
and you're very much correct, Lynn. When O'Malley drew the lines in 2012, he drew them in such a fashion that as many Republicans would be placed into District 33 as possible, so that the other districts, and there's a plus or minus of 5% as far as how many voters can be in one district or another, but of course that means a total swing of 10% between, let's say, 33 and another district, it was Governor O'Malley's design to pack as many Republicans as possible in 33, and then to give districts like District 32 a better Democrat advantage.
Tell us about your committee assignment. What committee are you on, and tell us a little bit about what that committee does.
I'm on judiciary, which we often sort of boast that we work the longest hours. It's not unusual for us to go until a late hour of the night. Judiciary handles a lot of things that are extremely significant and can be very emotional. We are literally dealing with issues that involve life or death. We deal with drunk driving laws. We deal with, and we've been working on Noah's Law, which has been very active and has required many hours of testimony. We've been dealing with Calvin-Alex Law, which has to do with the responsibility of adults and whether or not, if they provide alcohol to someone under 21, what effect it would have on them, whether they could be subject to a criminal time, jail time, as the result of doing so. And that was probably the most emotional night I had when we heard the testimony regarding two young men who had passed away, who had attended a party where there was alcohol served by an adult, and then the individuals who were only 18 left and unfortunately died in a tragic car accident. So,
well, I don't mind saying at all that your committee is definitely the busiest, hardest working committee, because what happens is you have these marathon hearings that go late into the night, and it's not unusual for you guys to still be going at midnight, right? I mean, it happens a lot.
It's not unusual. We haven't quite hit midnight this year. We've gone to
Not yet.
Not yet. We've gone to 10:30, 11. That was also a very emotional bill. That was the night when we heard, or we went quite late. I don't know if that was. We went quite late on the physician-assisted suicide, or at least that's how I like to refer to it, which is not going to be coming out for a vote. It died over on the Senate side, so it won't be going forward in the House. But that was also very emotional testimony and very lengthy testimony.
Absolutely. Let's talk about, we always like to get into the budget pretty quickly because that's always the biggest thing, the most work, the most time consuming. Len, give us an update as to where we are. I understand the Senate has started moving some aspects of the budget.
Yeah, each year they alternate between whether the House or the Senate moves it. This year the Senate is taking action first. It's out on the floor this week. It was a fairly lean budget. The governor has funded all the mandates completely. There is no accompanying legislation known as the BRFA where they adjust formulas, so the legislature doesn't have as much play with the budget, and all they can really do with the governor's budget is to cut it, except they have fenced off, the Senate has fenced off some money that they would like the governor to spend in addition, but if he chooses not to spend it, as is fairly likely, it just goes to the bottom line and it winds up as a surplus at the end of the year. So there's
and if I may, let me just explain that, first of all, when you talk about mandates, the governor has been talking a lot about their, what is it, a huge number, like 90% of the budget, 80% of the budget is all mandated by statute. So there's no really decision points there, and he wants more flexibility.
Well, it's 83% of the general fund budget. They try to raise that number to show how little within the general fund. Now, the general fund budget doesn't include roads and transit and universities and other things, but the discretionary part of the budget. But essentially, everything has been funded. People in with behavioral health issues and developmental disabilities, they've gotten some increases.
And then the BRFA, to explain that, the BRFA is like a local or a state version of like an omnibus bill where there's just everything from soup to nuts in there. And there is no BRFA this year, which is a big difference because that gives the legislature a lot of control over where money is being allocated. Right?
It gives them more leverage. So they have less leverage than they had last year, for instance, and that's the governor's plan.
Are you disappointed about that? You have less. You can't work through the BRFA.
I'm not disappointed. I think the governor proposed a budget which was in response to what the citizens of Maryland elected him to do. He did a lot of heavy lifting last year in dealing with the structural deficit, and which left us with a surplus. Coming into this budget, which was not the situation that was handed to him. I'm impressed that he has funded the educational mandates, which I believe is the first time that they've been fully funded, I think maybe in 8 years. He's fulfilling his promises, to take care of such things. He's redirecting funds regarding roads and transportation to where people live and drive. Although mass transit is important, we must look at the fact that 95% of the citizens of Maryland and most of the citizens of Anne Arundel County drive and don't necessarily use the benefits of mass transit. For Anne Arundel County, I think there's targeted to be a 50% increase in the amount of funds, taking it up to, I believe, about $8 million, which is about a 50% increase for local roads. And I think he's looking out for all of the citizens of Maryland with his budget, and also keeping taxes and fees in check, which was what he promised on the campaign trail, and he's brought it forth in his budget.
And let's talk about one aspect of that. Len, how do you see, is anything major changing with the budget? Do you see anything that the legislature wants to put their stamp on in particular? And we mentioned early in the session about the earned income tax credit. Is that still intact, and what's happening with that?
Well, the governor actually has a fairly modest agenda of things that were tax cuts for retirees, manufacturing. The earned income tax credit, the Senate seems willing to go along with some of the proposals, but the House Ways and Means Committee seems resistant, and at the moment it looks like the only thing that's definitely going to happen from a tax point of view is this earned income tax credit, and that is for, for people, for working people below a certain level of income, they can actually get back more taxes that in a refund than they paid in to cover like federal payroll taxes and things like that. That may be the only tax credit that survives, but we'll see. We still got, we still have 4 weeks left.
What do you think, Delegate? What do you think about the earned income tax credit? And
Well, I think it does help, those that are, have the least amount of income and are facing some of the most challenges. I'm disappointed that some of the other tax credits for middle class and for businesses are facing challenges that the governor proposed. There's been pushback on his, with the corporate tax, fees for filings, and that really affects small businesses. And small businesses are, the heart and soul of our economy. And
what do you mean by filings?
Well, when you file your corporate tax return, there's a fee for it, and the governor has looked to reduce those fees because it affects all small businesses, everyone who's incorporated, and unfortunately, there's been pushback on his efforts to reduce those fees, and that would help a small business, it would help the small businesses' bottom line, and enough help small businesses across the board, and he keeps working on it, and I think. All concerned if there could be a bipartisan effort to better promote the small businesses, I think it would be good for all the citizens of Maryland.
Is this where we start to get into a little bit of negotiation here where, is the legislature perhaps cordoning off a certain amount of money that they want to be used for something else other than some of these tax credits? Or how does that work, Len? Can the legislature add to the governor's budget?
Not really, but there's negotiation. The governor has already introduced his third supplemental budget, and that's the place where the negotiations have occurred. But because his tax proposals are really so modest, they actually had to, when they added up the numbers, they had to do it over 5 years to show that it was $400 million, $450 million. It's really only like $80 million in the first year. And what Delegate Malone was referring to was the $300 fee, essentially for the privilege of doing business in Maryland. You pay $300 a year. This was actually raised during the Ehrlich administration, and from $100. And Governor Hogan would like to take it back to $100 over 4 years, but that has already been rejected by the House Economic Matters Committee. And so, there's some room for negotiation, but I actually haven't seen very much negotiation going on here.
Interesting. Okay. Well, let's go back to your work in committee with the Judiciary Committee. Would it be fair to say that committee is, I'm going to use the word conservative, but they don't normally, it takes time for change to come in these areas, and I guess rightfully so, because you're talking about the length of prison terms, you're talking about crime and punishment and matters like that. Is that sort of the way this committee operates?
I would say that's accurate. Sometimes it can take years for an initiative to come forth. And a very hot topic this year has been Noah's Law. And the initiative in particular has been working to expand the interlock when an individual is stopped for drinking and driving, and when the individual goes to court, is to expand who is required to be on an interlock. And what an interlock is it means that for you to drive a vehicle, you must blow into a device that verifies that you are sober and you don't have alcohol in your system. And
that bill has passed your committee and also passed the House.
Correct. It has passed both. So now it'll be, matching up with the Senate side. And once again, it came about from a devastating situation in Montgomery County where a law enforcement official had stopped somebody for, drinking and driving. And while they were on the stop, they were struck and killed by another drunk driver. And unfortunately, sometimes it takes such a devastating, incident to bring about the change. There's a lot of studies that show that interlock prevents people from drinking and driving. And of course, if by preventing folks from doing that, you're saving lives. And that's going to be expanded, and there's going to be incentives for someone who is stopped to promptly sign up for the interlock. And if they fail to do so, they'll be facing additional suspension time. And then if they would ultimately be convicted, the only way they would get back their license would be to participate in an interlock program.
Len, let's talk real quick about redistricting, which is an issue that the governor has been behind. What is the governor's proposal with that, and how do you see that going right now?
Well, simply put, the governor's proposal is to have an independent commission with no politicians involved, drawing the district lines every 10 years as they must be done after the census. And the notion would be to be fair to all the parties. Polling has shown there's widespread support for that. The Democrats in the legislature, particularly the leadership, who are intensely involved in the drawing of the lines, are opposed to this, partly because in states that are more Republican-controlled, there's been the same level of gerrymandering that we have in Maryland. As you probably know, Arundel County is in 4 congressional districts at the moment.
And we have some of the most curly-Q ones in the whole state, right?
Yeah, so if you look at, in particular, Congressional District 3 and Congressional District 4, and those districts have been described as a prostate pterodactyl laying across a billiard table. They've been described as a blood spatter. They've been described as, broken leg spider. And candidly, it's embarrassing to Maryland. If you read national publications will say that Maryland has now risen to the top as far as gerrymandering. And I don't like for Maryland to be portrayed in such a fashion.
And just as a practical matter, if you're a citizen, there's a good chance you don't know in Anne Arundel County who your congressman is, because the districts are drawn in such a way. I literally have, where I live in Pasadena, I have John Sarbanes, and then across the street is Donna Edwards. So it's very confusing.
It's extremely confusing. And in fact, the leader of Common Cause, who happens to be a resident in District 33, helped sponsor with some other individuals traveling the whole circumference of, I believe it was District 3, and the amount of time it took and the amount of miles that had to be covered were unbelievable. I mean, you may if travel in a short distance in a straight line, go through 2, 3, 4 congressional districts,
flies, right.
Just in a few minutes, but to go around the circle, or it's certainly not a circle, once again it's more like a blood spatter, it would take you days to travel the full length around the congressional district. And it very much affects things. Anne Arundel County has not had a congressional representative that came primarily from Anne Arundel County since Marjorie Holt. We're going back to, I think, when I was in high school. And it's very concerning. It's very difficult for a congressional representative to put forth concerns for Anne Arundel County. It affects.
So what happens next with this? Is there an opportunity for people to get involved?
Well, right now there are 2 bills. There's House Bill 458 and there's Senate Bill 380. Those 2 bills are before the Rules Committee, and I would very much encourage folks to reach out to their representative and to reach out to the Rules Committee to encourage the commission that Len described previously, which is a bipartisan commission. It involves 3 members, I believe, from the Democrat Party, 3 members from the Republican Party, and then 3 members from who are selected from neither of the Republicans or the Democrats. And would be a bipartisan effort to select to draw the lines in such a fashion that they make sense. So they do things like follow. The Maryland Constitution has some protection, and even that's played with, but at least the Maryland Constitution provides that states, and these are state, not congressional districts, must be drawn to follow political and geographic boundaries. And in fact, when Governor Glendening went too far, when he drew the lines in 2000, following the 2000 census, at that point, there was a law challenge, and it went to the Court of Appeals of Maryland, and the Court of Appeals, and I'm particularly sensitive to this because my wife happened to be one of the plaintiffs, overruled the map as drawn by Governor Glendening.
Yep.
Because
and didn't our clerk of the court, Mr. Duckworth, I believe, was also involved in that?
He may have been, and I know he's also been involved in some of the congressional lawsuits. Mm-hmm. And it's important to tighten up those rules because back with that 2000 plan by Governor Glendening, it actually had part of Anne Arundel County where you would have to take a boat to go from Anne Arundel County to Dundalk to cover a state legislative district. So to me,
you could get nauseous on a ride like that.
You could.
It's
you
bumpy.
could.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I just wanted to say that you'd be very lucky to actually even have a vote on these bills, and they've had hearings, but it's very possible they won't even get a vote. So, as Delegate Malone was saying, if people want to, they're in the House Rules Committee, which is largely the legislative leadership chairman and vice chairman. There are Republican leaders on the committee, but it's very possible the proposal will not even get a vote. So we'll have to see. They, had the hearing 2 weeks ago at least.
Let's talk about, Len, you mentioned the crossover deadlines are coming, and we always like to point out to people that while you have these big overarching issues like gun control and so-called right to die and the budget and things like that, you also have these local bills that are sponsored by Delegate Malone and our county delegation, 21 members of our delegation. What's happening with those bills right now?
Well, those bills, once they come out of the delegation, then they move to a standing committee. And the great majority of them overall, there's always a few, controversial bills in Anne Arundel County. We always have something relating to the school board. Mm-hmm. But the great majority of bills, and we've been going through scores of them in the past week, have to deal with this complicated alcoholic beverage laws, which vary from county to county, and different kinds of licenses and when you can sell beer and wine and who can sell it and what day they can sell it. And it's one of these things where nobody has tried to change it because everybody's kind of wed to the idea of, we have our own little local legislation.
So you're saying the local courtesy may not be too in play this
year?
Well,
the local courtesy works once it gets through a standing committee and comes to the floor. There are very few times that people are going to object to a local bill unless it has some kind of statewide implications.
Well, that's a good lead up. Tell us what's going on with the school board bill in Anne Arundel County.
The school board bill has come to the delegation, and just a recent vote. In the recent vote, we're going to be changing dramatically how the school board nominating commission is set up. And the way it works is it's sort of 2 parts. You have a commission where individuals are appointed to the commission, and then the commission then makes recommendations for the school board. And it started out with an initial effort to modify how a representative to the commission came from a chamber of commerce, and then it sort of exploded into a much larger bill, which is caused me a lot of personal frustration because I don't believe it's really been properly vetted. It's going to change and add a lot of special interest, and I recognize the importance of having diversity within the commission. But when you speak of diversity, one of the other very important things is to have members of the commission come from all parts of the county. Have individuals come from South County, North County, West County, the Pasadena area. And the change has now been brought about that where that is not going to be how the commission exists. Furthermore, this new bill, House Bill 172, is with the amendments, is going to remove many of the governor's appointments to the commission. And to me, that's concerning. This county, Anne Arundel County, dramatically supported the governor. He had a clear majority vote from Anne Arundel County, and there's been some frustration over some of the appointments. But what is not taken into account is since the election, the full school board has not been appointed. We still have more members that'll come. It takes a while to rotate the change of school board members.
And your district is next.
My district is next, District 33, and part of one of my roles as an official is to get the word out to folks and make sure folks know that there's this opportunity to serve on the commission and also to serve on the school board, because it's very important. On the county budget level, half of the budget goes to education.
Right,
and
$1 billion.
Correct.
$1 billion total for the school system.
Correct. So there's now a change in how the school board is going to be selected, and I think it was rushed. I think it's concerning that the governor's appointments have been removed. And I think it's really getting to the point where I think now there's been some whisper talk that now it may be time for an elected school board, which I agree with. I mean, that's the best way to have the people involved and make sure the people have a voice in how our school board is selected.
And just to be clear, that bill still has to be approved by the Senate.
That is correct.
So with the speed and frenzy that's going on at the end of the session, you have to wonder if this bill is going to make it, because it's been changed and it's been altered and it's getting late. So
it's getting late, and then in the end, this bill, which is dramatically different than what originally came before the delegation and showed up on the delegation agenda for nearly a month, with amendments continuing to occur or being on the agenda and then not being on the agenda. I hope the Senate will look at it very closely, and it's my opinion that the new bill with the amendments, which I voted against, should be also voted down by the Senate, and I hope they look at it very closely. And then I hope it's something we look at and take seriously off session and come back prepared to address the issue in 2017.
Well, guys, you have about 4 weeks left, and it's going to start to get really nitty-gritty now, and you guys are going to be very busy. So we really appreciate you coming on the show today. I want to thank Delegate Mike Malone for being with us, and Len Lazarick. That's all we have for this edition, and you can be sure to like Len Lazarick's Facebook page, which is MarylandReporter.com online, and we'll see you next time.